Hola, bienvenidos. Today's video is going to walk us through creating a short story for our students. This story can then be added to an asynchronous assignment, or you can use it with a synchronous activity in the draw room. Also a Charlala hack, not all teachers use this tool to create stories. Some teachers use it to organize a list of questions or prompts that they want their students to respond to using the draw room. Let's go ahead and create our first story. To begin, after logging into your teacher dashboard, click My Library in the top left. Click Stories. You'll notice previous stories you created stored here, but in order to create a new one, up at the top, click Create Story. We'll start by giving the story a name, The Smart and Lazy Boy. This title will be visible to students. We want to identify the language of the story. For this example, I'm going to tell it in English, but this would be whatever target language you're writing the story in, the level of your story, and then we want to add a cover image to the story. If you want to design your own using other software, go ahead and upload an image here, or you can search a free gallery from Pexels. I will search for lazy. That first one looks pretty good to me. Next options, whether we want to include audio recording. I'm going to include just to show you what it looks like from the student perspective. Final option is whether we want to submit this to the public library. Right now that isn't visible, but that is coming very shortly, and whether you'd like to share this story with other educators on the platform. Now we can go ahead and create the first part to our story. Notice we have part 1 already outlined for us. We want to go ahead and add the text to part 1 of the story. There is a boy, Marcos, that is very lazy but also very smart. He does not like doing his chores, especially making his bed. After we add the text to the story, we can notice an audio option available on the right. This will only be visible if you enabled this option when you first created the story. Let's go ahead and record the audio for this first part. There is a boy, Marcos, that is very lazy, but also very smart. He does not like doing his chores, especially making his bed. You can go ahead and preview that audio if you'd like before approving. And now we can see that audio is attached to this text. Now we'll go ahead and add the other parts to our story. Every morning, Marcos does not want to make his bed, but his mother yells, "Make your bed!" You can notice when I create my stories, I like to add all the parts first, add all the text, and then I go back and record each part's audio at the same time as well. As soon as you finish recording audio for each part, we want to go ahead and save. We are now done with our first story. Our next step is turning this story into an assignment. We can do that from our story library by clicking right here, or we can go to Assignments at the top and click Create New Assignment. Afterwards, we want to first identify that it is a story assignment, and then we have some basic information to fill out. All of this information will be visible to students, so keep that in mind. We'll start with an assignment name, The Smart and Lazy Boy, and then we'll give the assignment some directions to draw your best interpretation of each scene. A due date, which we'll leave blank for right now, and then privacy settings. If your students have Charlala accounts, you should go ahead and make this a private assignment. If your students do not have accounts, you want to make this a public assignment, and that way you can share a link with them to complete it. We'll click Next. We will want to find the story that we want to attach, The Smart and Lazy Boy. If we have any concerns, we can preview that story. We confirm that's the right story. Let's go ahead and add it to our assignment. We'll click Next. The next step is identifying what type of feedback we want to provide for students. We can provide text feedback, such as a written comment, or rubric feedback using a rubric that we already created. Since this is a very basic draw story, I just want to provide text feedback or a comment, and then I also have to identify, do I want to provide one comment for the entire assignment, or do I want to provide a comment for each individual part or drawing? For this assignment, I just want one overall comment for the entire assignment. Click Next, and then some final settings before we create this assignment. Do we want students to see the written text? Do we want them to be able to read the story? Audio. If we have recorded audio, do we want them to be able to hear the audio and play it back for themselves? And then finally, whether we want the drawing canvas to allow stickers or not. These top two settings are the most important here. The only time you would really disable the show text is if you wanted to provide your students with a listening or an interpretive activity. With these settings as they are, without showing text and showing audio, students would only be able to listen and not read the story and then draw their interpretation accordingly. For this activity, I'm going to keep both on to show you what it would look like, and we'll go ahead and click Create. We now have that new assignment created, the Smart and Lazy Boy. It is a public assignment, so I do have a link right here that I can share, or we can go ahead and view this assignment in our assignments. We now see it, the last one right here, currently with no responses. Let's go ahead and copy this link, and we're going to pretend as if we are a student completing the assignment, just so you can see what the student experience looks like. Now, this is the student view of how they would interact with this assignment. They would start by filling out their first and last name. Email is optional, and so is last name if it's a public assignment. We'll go ahead and start. Now, from the student perspective, they can see the entire story laid out for them. They can read through everything in sequence. They can play through the audio. Notice if our settings were different and we were hiding the text, only the audio would be visible right here for students. Next thing is students are directed to go ahead and create a drawing for each part of the story. So I'm going to go ahead. Part 1, there is a boy, Marcos, that is very lazy, but also very smart. He hates doing his chores, especially making his bed. And create. We can see that I'm done with my interpretation of scene 1. It's important that the first few times that you do an assignment like this with students, that you really lay a strong foundation as to why we're completing assignments like this. This is an activity that involves drawing, but it is not a drawing activity. Drawing is not the goal of what we're doing. Our goal is to use drawing to show what we understand. I can really show to the teacher that I understand what's going on based off of what I read or based off of what I heard. We'll go ahead and submit this first part to the story, and let's go ahead and move forward to our second part. After students are done with each part of the story or each question or prompt that you leave them behind, they can go ahead and review each part if they'd like and click Finish. They're reminded that they've completed all the parts. And then look at this. They're done with the story that they just read. From here, they can do a couple of things. If they want to download an individual image, they can click that. Or if they want to download the entire storyboard, they can do that here as well. Or return back to their account. Let's go ahead and switch to the teacher perspective so you can see how we would provide feedback for students. We can now see that on that story, the Smart and Lazy Boy, we have one student response. At a brief glance, we can see that student name, the date that they completed it, that we haven't left them any feedback, and that it took them 28 minutes to complete. Notice the class is left blank since this was a public assignment and a public link. Students are not logged into a class. Let's go ahead and view that student response. We can now see each part or question that they answered, and then we can provide a general comment feedback on the entire assignment. This is a friendly reminder that the feedback settings can be adjusted right here, and if you would prefer to include rubric feedback or if you'd prefer to include feedback for each individual story part, you can adjust that in the settings at any time. This was a brief summary on how to create your first Charlala story and how to turn that into an assignment for students to complete. In future videos, we'll talk about taking this story and using it in the draw room. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or suggestions. Nos vemos pronto. Ciao.